I was just telling Stephanie and Amy before this began that, when I finally moved to Asheville, doing an event at Malaprops was like one of the most thrilling moments of my career. So I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for having me. And thank you, Amy. Amy wrote this amazing book, In the Shadow of the Moon. I just finished it. It's so riveting. It's about the space race. It's a total page turner. I just loved it. It made me cry at times. It made me like gasp in surprise. It's amazing. So thank you, Amy, for doing this.
Are you kidding? I'm delighted to be here. I'm such a fan. Thank you for reading my book. That's never going to get old. I'm so excited to be here because like I said, I am a huge fan of your books. And I'm also obviously a big fan of fantasy. I write nonfiction, but I don't know how to write fantasy. So it's kind of where I go to when I'm not reading true stories. I usually read fantasy first. So I was really excited that you invited me, and I'm glad that we get to do this. I wanted to see if you wanted to kick us off by reading something. Reading maybe a passage or a page or 2 or 3 or 10. I mean, we all love stories. We'll probably sit here all night and listen to you read to us. But if you want to read a little to us, and then I'll ask you some questions, and then we'll take some questions from everyone who's tuning in from home.
Okay, great. Yep. This won't be 10 pages, but it'll be a couple. Okay. Finally, silently, the sad witch emerges through the doors, this time with something bulging under her cloak. Is it done? The second witch asks, and the meek, empty-looking one nods. I've laid my curse. The oak's woman's memories are mine now, she says, moths fluttering out of her sleeves as she speaks. She won't remember anything, not us, not our secrets, not the sight, not even herself. The second witch considers for a moment, her mouth crooked in bitterness. She glances at the ghostly moths fluttering through the air, then turns her eyes to the lump under her companion's robes. And this, she asks? No one will remember him either. The sad witch waves a hand, and the folds of her cloak part to reveal a baby, hovering in the air just in front of her stomach. She smiles down at him. There is something terribly needy and desperate about that smile. Strange. The Oakses are always girls, the blue-eyed witch reflects. The grasping witch clearly longs for the baby. She appears to be the kind of witch who longs for everything. Can I keep him? She asks. The blue-eyed witch fingers the pocket watches around her neck and looks down at the baby with disgust. Then she waves a hand, and the baby floats across the space between them. He begins to cry as the blue-eyed witch glares at him. I want no more of this family. The last of them comes with me. What will you do with him? The grasping witch asks. The other witch smirks, her eyes as blank and endless as a reptile's, and then she gazes in the direction of the ocean, though it is too far off to be seen. It's a fine night for swimming, she says, before waving the child toward her into the folds of her own cloak, which close around him like curtains. The two witches look at each other meaningfully, their dark hearts beating a thorny, unsteady rhythm. And then, as quickly as they appeared, the witches drift into the forest from which they came. And, but for the trees and stones and spiders and crickets and cats, nobody sees. Nobody but one curious ghost with glowing red eyes and a rash around his neck. No one will whisper that when two witches came to St. Ignatius Hospital to settle an old score, and take the memories and the firstborn child of a woman named Annabelle Oakes. Annabelle Oakes saw them coming and had just a flash of a moment to hide an infant away. There will be no one to reveal the fatal mistake of a sad and grasping witch confusing one baby for another. A quiet baby, as it turns out, a baby who knew how to keep to herself. Of one innocent baby doomed and another saved. Only one ghost knows of these things, and for reasons of his own, he will not talk. For now, the crickets in the grass listen in silence for a few moments longer, but then they go back to their chirping. The forest resumes its usual noises. A moment is swallowed into the past, and a restless, angry spirit keeps his secrets for a time.
so good. Restless, angry spirits, witches, babies stolen, lives forgotten. I mean, this book has everything. I devoured it. And I was telling Jodi Lynn before we got started that I'm not a fan of reading scary things. And I thought, it's a middle grade novel. I can handle this. And I was so absorbed in the story in the first few chapters. And there's a creep factor there that is so beautifully. It's so lyrical and beautifully drawn that you're a little on edge, because clearly something's very amiss in this world. We have, witches, first of all, and a stolen baby that may have met with terrible fate. But the language and the atmosphere just pulls you along. And I was so absorbed. The UPS delivery person like knocked on my door to leave a package, and I jumped and yelled because I was so so absorbed. So you all have that to look forward to when you read this amazing book. You're going to just be sucked right in. As a reader of fantasy, and especially loving to read fantasy for young readers, middle grade and young adult, one cannot talk about fantasy without talking about Harry Potter a little bit. And I noticed the dedication in your book. The book is dedicated to Harry himself, this imaginary kid with the world on his shoulders. And I wondered why Harry as a character was deserving of your book's dedication.
Yeah, I started this book. This book took me a really long time. I've never taken this long to write a book. I started it about 4 years ago. And I did about, I don't know, I turned into my editor maybe 5 drafts. I probably did on my own like 12 drafts altogether. And by about the 5th draft, I felt like I was in trouble. This is a disaster. There was just something that was not, I could not break past. And I went down to my husband's office and he was working, and he works at home, and I just started crying. And he said, well, I said, the book's a disaster. And he said, well, what do you want it to be about? And I was weeping, and I just said, I just want it to be about how much I love Harry Potter. And he was like, okay. But I think like really what I meant by that was just how I've found shelter in books, Harry Potter specifically when I was, in my 20s. But how books have rescued me so many times in so many ways, and how they've protected me, and how I've escaped to them. And, and it's all kinds of books. It's not just, the books that challenge me and make me think, but also the books that are just wrap around me like a blanket. I know a lot of us feel that way. And so for me, that book really, through a lot of challenging times in my life, was Harry Potter. And so, I really wanted to acknowledge that, and he pops up in the book at crucial moments, and words from those books pop up at crucial moments. And that was always, one of the major seeds, was that he was going to be there somehow. So,
yeah. I love that. And I think that's as a bookseller who specializes in books for young readers, kids love that intertextuality. They love to read books that are about other books that they can also identify with. I think a lot of times with reluctant readers, that's a way that you can reassure them, that just because a grown-up wrote the book, first of all, that they're not a phony, right? Like I speak your language. I love these books too. And I think that was as much as it was an organic choice for you to do that, it was very much a part of your writing process. I think too, that's just so valuable to show young readers those connections between stories. I really love that.
Thank you. Yeah. I think that, this is the first book I've written kind of about books and about loving books. And it felt so cathartic to do that, because it felt like, that is always there, and it's nice
Yeah.
to share that. And I know so many people feel that way. So
Yeah. And I do think everyone feels that way about reading. I think young readers specifically, books are tokens, with kids. They trade them, and they market them, and they share them back and forth, and they become these, really, important, I think, symbols of friendship and connection. And to have that, be part and parcel of the story. I loved it. It was beautiful. But if we're going to talk about Harry Potter, and certainly if we're going to talk about 13 Witches, we're going to have to talk about, some epic themes here. You write pretty unabashedly about good and evil. I mean, in that section you read, something's gone terribly wrong for this family at this particular night.
mhm.
Two children, one of whom may be, bound for terrible fate. So the stakes are really high from the very beginning. And, I wondered, in writing about something like that, something so dramatic as a lost child, or a mother being separated from her child or children, were you worried that you would frighten
Mhm.
kids who were reading your book?
Um, I think there's like there's two kinds of fear, I think, in this book. And one is kind of, I really hope there's a spine tingling
Yes, there
kids who love
is.
ghosts, kids who love to be spooked out. Like I really want to be talking to those readers, and and just having that fun experience of that kind of fear. There is like this deeper fear in a lot of the themes with the baby who's taken, and the witches, and what the witches represent. And I think for me, the witches represent all the things that are scary. um and I think you know one thing that's been really interesting for me, I published my first book like over 20 years ago. It makes me feel like I'm like 110 years old, but like I um I get letters, I get letters from, I write my stories. I started writing my stories just for myself, and like a way for me to
Right.
process the world, and for me to sort of feel empowered in the face of things that sort of I don't know how to fight against, or deal with or process. But over the years, after having written some of these books so long ago, the biggest kind of unexpected like bonus and surprise for me, and like the greatest part of being a writer for me, is getting letters from people. And sometimes now, because it's been so long, I get letters from grown people who like identify with those things that I was fearful of and processing, and like say that the story helped them process it too, or feel
Yeah.
less alone. And that I think that anything that I'm sort of afraid of, like, is the same thing like someone who's 10 is sort of afraid of. I
Yeah.
think we all sort of share that. And so for me, like, acknowledging those things, and finding this book is so much about finding ways to hope, and to feel empowered in the face of those things. I think it just feels important to write about. And so
Yeah.
um of course, I think about that, it's a responsibility,
Mhm.
but I also, I hope that I'm connecting with someone on sort of our shared
Yeah.
concerns, and making them feel like I get them,
Yeah.
and we can connect. And yeah.
Yeah. I have this sort of working theory that this is why middle grade and young adult novels are so popular with grown-ups, because that is the place in books where you can always find the hope. Hope either because people are young and there's still time to, grow and change, but also, the hope in being reminded that, all of these things that you're describing, good versus evil, common fears that we have, these are all common to all of us, whether we're 5 or 50 or 95. And I think that may be one reason why, especially, I think middle grade novels specifically. I sell so many of these books to young people in the store, but I sell a bunch of them to grown-ups too, who just, I think, need to reconnect with something, or, be comforted. And I definitely felt spine tingling suspense and comfort in this book, which was, you balanced that beautifully. I still haven't quite figured out how you did it. I'm going to have to read it again because it was masterful. So in thinking about good versus evil and things that we're afraid of, we're living in the middle of extraordinary times on multiple levels. And I wondered if you started this story, years ago, what made you do that? What made you want to write this story? Or I guess a better way to say is, why this story? Why now?
Yeah, I think, it evolved as I was writing the book. I think like always new things were kind of coming up that were sort of, kind of uncovered as this book is about this. And I didn't know that it's about this, and it's all coming from kind of what's going on outside. I think that for one thing, like the past few years, has really made me think a lot about the power of words, and like, let's not pretend that words don't matter, and the words that people say don't matter, and that words shape the world. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. Like, words shape who we are, and shape our culture, and shape our decisions, and shape how we respond to crises. And so that was really at the top of my mind a lot, and it kind of rose higher and higher on the list. I'm, Marcus Zusak, the book thief, like that's like the so like ultimately inspiring about, just the different ways that words can be used for good and ill. And then I think the other thing is that I felt like was important, that I wanted to kind of weave through, was also just imagination, and like where words and imagination meet, but also like, I think a lot of times, like I'm guilty of this, where I think of imagination as sort of this frivolous extra thing that we get. And like, it's like something that sort of adds like texture, but is not necessarily like something so that's such a necessity. And I think that's just, the longer I'm alive, like the more I feel like that's absolutely not true, that imagination is so much a piece of hopefulness. And I read John Lewis's Across That Bridge autobiography while I was writing this, and he, how he kind of defines faith is like you're moving towards something, you don't know if you'll get there, but you can imagine it, and like imagining it is the way you start moving toward it. And I really, I think Rosie underestimates what her imagination is for in the beginning. And by the end, she finds that actually it's just an incredible resource and incredible power. And I try not to be, I try not to be too heavy-handed about that, but I really, I wanted that, her imagination, to fuel her ability to overcome what she's facing.
Yeah. I think that is, I think that's really well said. And of course, children are masterful with imagination from the get-go. I think we all sort of forget, the older we get, how, not just how important, I mean, we wouldn't innovate anything without imagination. We wouldn't be driving automobiles if someone hadn't imagined that we could. And I think that, reminding young readers that of the value in that, when lots of times, culture and rules and school and life tell you that, oh, don't daydream, you have to do your homework, or, you need to focus on what's important. And sometimes wonderful things happen when we lose focus. Not always a bad thing.
I think that, like young people have a lot of skills that I don't have, we don't have. And like, it's amazing to learn from them. Like I feel like, and that trust they have a lot of times in their imagination is something that I think as adults, oftentimes we could use some relearning on that.
Yeah, we do well to pay a little closer attention.
Yeah.
This is the first book in a planned trilogy, which I love. Did you I feel like this is the question every author of every trilogy in the world ever gets asked, but I mean, I can't imagine deciding to write 3 books from the beginning. If that sounds that just sounds like triple the homework to me. I think it sounds terrible. But did you did you imagine it as one big story and then cut it into 3 parts, or did you see it as a trilogy from the very beginning?
So before I started this book, I really thought I would never write like a series again. I just, yeah, for kind of what the reasons you mentioned, like I just felt it is just it's so many years and it's just such a, there's just so much. And I'm not a logistical thinker. And there's a lot of, if you're going to stretch it out over a trilogy, you got to do some planning. And I'm planning is not really my thing.
Me neither.
I could not tell that with this book. It's no,
Yay.
it's meticulous. But yeah, so but then when I actually had the idea for the 13 Witches, I thought it would be 2 books. And then there's this sort of twist that happens sort of maybe 3/4 of the way through the book. And the thing that is sort of introduced by that twist, which I didn't know was coming, sort of necessitated this middle book. I knew the final section from the beginning, and was kind of looking toward that, and I just didn't see this middle piece coming. And I've just finished my first draft of that, and I'm so excited about it. It's really it's just more of like a fast-paced adventure type, middle section. Yeah, so I think I don't know, it just seems like there's that like magic ratio of like it just seems like, yeah, most stories kind of, if they're going to be more than one, they tend to be and I know that's been with books, the Maybird trilogy also. So yeah, but it was fun sort of, and then I talked to my agent and said, I think this is going to be 3 books, and so we had to go to Simon and Schuster and see if they were okay with that, and they very graciously were. So yeah,
that's great. Yeah, I think that probably I wonder how often this happens, because I mean, whether or not you plan a lot, and we'll talk about that a little in a minute, whether or not you plan a lot before you sit down to write, inevitably, no matter what you write, and this happens to me in writing nonfiction, there's always like that out of left field moment where it's like this, and I don't know if this feels this way to you, but it's like something comes along and you're like, I'm not dealing with that. No, I'm not. I'm just going to stay the course. I'm going to do what I need to do, but it just won't let go. And then you start sort of like, okay, well, I'll consider it for a minute. And then before you know it, it's just taken over the whole thing. But the story just blooms from that point all over again. And that is the magic of the imagination, right? This is why imagination is so important, but it's true. Also can be, daunting, and, oh, by the way, you have to say to your publisher, surprise, can I write 3 books instead of 2? I think that's, this is the kind of thing that I really want people to know when they go to listen to authors talk, because I think it looks very buttoned down and planned from the beginning, and it's a creative process. Anything can happen. And I think the really best stories embrace the chaos.
Yeah, that's so well said. I
Hopefully embrace it.
Yeah, we don't have as much control as we'd like to have. And I know for me, like almost every book I write, I'm like, there's not going to be ghosts in here. Not doing ghosts, like no more ghosts. Like, and the ghosts just Like, I guess, I have no control.
It's as if you're haunted. Sorry,
It's
I couldn't help
haunted.
myself. Yeah, I couldn't help myself. Sorry. Yeah, it was just hanging there, right there. I just couldn't let it go. You portray a type of mental illness in the book, which I thought was really moving and powerful, and you handle it so beautifully in the text. It's just such an organic part of the story, and it's a very normalized part of your protagonist's life, but it's palpable and it's wrenching, and it's as much as there is these spine-tingling moments in the book, these just heart-wrenching descriptions of her living with this disconnect from one of her parents. It's painful. And Harry Potter lived his entire life disconnected from his parents. So I kept going back to this, finding comfort and wrestling with this, feeling lost in the world and disconnected from your parents and having to make your own way. What do you want young readers to take from that part of your story, that very, the real, I think, beating heart of your story?
Yeah, I think, I think that, speaking like what you were saying about imagination, I think that that's just something that was swirling. We were getting licensed for foster care when I was writing this book. And, just hearing a lot of stories about parents who, for a lot of different reasons, many of which beyond their control, were not able to kind of provide that care at that time for kids. And so I think that was just on my emotions a lot when I was writing that book, and it wasn't conscious, but I think that fed into there. And another thing was, just being a somewhat new parent myself. And I think I was kind of surprised by how physical the love is for my kids, like how, it's not like when I physically hurt when they hurt, and things like if the baby wakes up, it's like the broom in Fantasia. Like, it's just like my body's going, like my mind is not willing, but like my body's going. And that, like, I just didn't know what that would be. And so I think that's also kind of really planted in Rosie's mom, because her memories have been taken by a witch. So she couldn't tell Rosie about the day she was born, but they're like, I don't want to spoiler, but like it manifests, like that love that's still in her body. There are moments where that manifests and kind of ties into the mystery of the book. And I think, like, as far as what I would love readers to take away from that situation is just, I think Rosie, like, she builds love in other places where she's not getting it here, but she is resourceful and she has an inner world, and she has cultivated this like bright, funny, loyal relationship with this best friend who is just her other half, and a big part of the story. And also, like, her stories, like, everybody has their different ways of building that richness in their world. And like, for her, it's her stories, and her stories are like her friend, her family, just her writing. So yeah.
I think that I think that's really well said, because there's a lot of what I noticed when I was so just torn up reading this. I mean, she just tries so hard. She has to take care of herself basically, and always has, ostensibly. And what amazed me about this kid, who is, frank about the fact that this is just her life and she doesn't know, why it's like this, but it just is the way that it is. But she has learned to cope in this way that is remarkable. And I think, that's a real testimony to the resilience of kids in general, and how, despite circumstances and changes in their lives, big changes, changes that would, rattle even the, even grown-ups, of course, sometimes to a worse degree, depending, she finds a way, she finds a way to cope. She finds a way to get, what she needs, the things that she's not able, that her mother's not able to give her. She finds those things in other people. And ultimately, of course, is trying to find those things within herself. And I think that's such an important thing to we say this stuff to kids all the time, right? You have to, be resilient, and it's okay to have feelings, but you have to be honest with yourself. We tell them all these things, but, in books, we can show them, here's how you can be. And I think I think that's the most heroic part of her for me, is her ability to cope, and to kind of be this emblem of what that looks like for kids, even though, her life's not perfect. And it's certainly, she's being called to an adventure to, try to set things right. But she just tries. She just keeps trying. I loved that about her. She's so resilient.
Thank you. I think that I really, I try with all my characters, I hope, like, I want her to have her, she has her insecurities, and they are part of her confidence. Like, there are plenty of things that she is nervous about and shy about and insecure about, but she is her own best friend also. And she writes these notes to herself, like, "You looking taller, sweetie." She always wants to grow, and she's your teeth are, looking, just all these different things she does that are kind of I think, like, I it's important to me that I want to write characters that have insecurities and are confident and okay with having those insecurities. I think that's really important for kids to not feel like they have to hide that.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I loved that she writes these notes to herself. Her mother can't, she writes her own note to herself, on her lunch. And she just sort of takes it upon herself to make herself okay. She just fills in the blanks. It's I loved that. I loved her. Let's see what else we want to talk about. Okay, so I'm a big process nerd. I love to hear writers talk about their process, mainly because mine is very unscientific and very analog. And I keep hoping I'm going to ask this question of someone someday, and the light's going to go on, and my process is just going to be magically transformed.
Yeah, it's funny because I'd be like, Amy has it all figured out. Like, reading, like, I would totally assume that you've got it.
Head on the desk, 17 drafts, and eventually you get to what you're trying to say. That's my process. But I'm curious if you want to tell a little bit about your process in general, but I really want to know, and especially planning, as much as you initially had 2 books and then it ended up being 3, how do you, are you a plotter or a pantser? So do you fly by the seat of your pants when you write, or do you plot everything out meticulously in advance?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I have to say I'm with you. I'm sorry to be another one.
Okay.
That
maybe the next person will be able to help me. I'll just keep asking.
Yeah, we have to be able to find one. I talked to Jane Smiley's daughter once at a party, and she said her mom's totally got it all under control. I was like, oh, so Jane Smiley.
Okay, well, that's okay. There you have it. Question answered. He was there all along.
Jane Smiley.
Just a couple quick questions.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wonder, I don't know I wonder if it's like this for you, but yeah, it's like a 2-step forward, 1-step back process. So I do definitely set out to outline. I think probably I just throw it all out there as some kind of incomplete half story, and then I try to kind of outline from there, and then I try to write from the outline, and then I write until I'm stuck, and then I realize I have to re-outline, and the process repeats
Yeah.
until it's completely maddening. And I
Yes.
get to the like you said, like 17th draft, and I'm like, I'm getting to like I'm in chapter 27, and like I'm almost there, and then I hit a wall. And I'm like, I gotta re-outline. I gotta re-outline this whole book again.
Yeah.
Is it? Are you?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
I feel much better.
See, I feel like, see, my whole thing is, because I don't write fiction, it's like, why make it up when you can look it up? That's kind of my motto, right? And you'd think that would solve a host of problems when it comes to, formatting and, structure. But I do the same thing. I start writing. I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. And I write and I write and I write. And then something happens in the middle, and the whole thing just starts to expand in the middle. And then I realize that I've focused too closely on one thing and I have to pull back out. And then ultimately that means I have to do another outline. But I don't outline from the beginning. I start writing and then outline. And so I think you and I, sadly, you're not going to be able to help me. We do the exact same thing.
We need to have a really long talk about this, actually, because but but I mean, I know I just sound like I'm buttering up, but your book is so like beautifully structured, and like every chapter you're dropped right in the beginning of the good stuff. You're right in the good stuff, like from like the first, sentence. Each chapter is like that.
Oh,
And
thanks.
I didn't know it was like that for nonfiction too, that it often is
Yeah.
like this
Yeah.
just surprising
Yeah.
mush of like, what am I gonna, I gotta re-outline. Like
Yeah,
that's
well, because everything, and this may be the same with fantasy, it's like you're world building, right? So you have to have some sort of sense of, you have 13 witches, what are they going to be like? What are their powers going to be? And you have to kind of make sense of that for yourself.
mhm.
Um, and be able to operate within, the rules that you make up for this world. And in nonfiction, it's, I can't make anything up, but it's easy to get bogged down in things that are, you think you're trying to clarify something when in fact you're just boring everybody to tears, and trying to choose what to leave out is the hard part. But what I wonder about with, when you're writing a trilogy, and if you're, so I guess this is where your outlining must come in. You start working, and something goes sideways and you realize you have to re-outline, but are you, is that for one book, or are you always keeping one eye on the ultimate end point at the end of the trilogy?
Well,
That's where I think I would fall to pieces.
um, I no, I do not do that. I have just a vague idea of where I want to end up with the third book, but I don't, I mean, I just could never outline that far ahead. That would just
Okay, that's very comforting. Thank you for saying that.
no. And yeah, I do think like sometimes, like depending on the timing, like they were with the second, the first draft of this second of this trilogy, like I know that the publication date or the to print date for 13 Witches is getting closer. In the meantime, I'm working on book two. And I'm like, oh, it'd be super helpful if in book one, like this had happened. And I like send a frantic
Oh,
email to, my editor,
oh.
like, oh, is it too late? Or conversely, like, oh my gosh, like I made this happen in book one. I'm trapped. Like this is a major trap. And so, you know, luckily, like my editor's amazing, and usually, like, she if she can, she'll totally help work
Yeah,
with me on that.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, sometimes it's too late, and then
yeah,
and then you just have to, you know, be creative and try to get around it.
yeah,
And I think usually when those roadblocks happen, usually I feel like you find something
yeah,
better.
yeah,
I think like
yeah,
that's just the law of the universe somehow with
yeah.
writing. I think.
Yeah.
Um,
I think you have to satisfy like a suffering quotient. I think you get to a certain point where it's like you're just so angry that you can't go back and change the thing, right? That
yeah,
you finally just exhaust yourself, and your brain just, your subconscious is like, okay, fine, I'll step in.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do. Yeah. No,
All
that's a.
right, clearly you can't do it on your own.
Yeah. Then you curl into a ball on the floor for a while, and
That's
then
right. That's
yeah,
right. Eat a
right.
bunch of ice cream. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all very,
British Baking Show. Watch that for a
ugh.
while.
Oh, on loops. I do. Jodi Lynn, I think we might be soulmates. Okay.
I've already told you this, that I think,
I
I'm the
think we
treasurer
might
of
be.
your fan club. So
I think I'm delighted to know I have one. I'm so glad to be in it if you're there.
yeah, and I do the president, but Carolyn Christopoulos, also a Malaprop's person, is president.
All right. Well, I'm in very esteemed company then. I'm delighted. Um, okay, so process is just what it is. Bottom line there, we just get through it as best as we can, except, some people seem to have, who did you tell me? I need to write that down. Who has it figured out?
Oh, Jane Smiley has it
Jane
figured.
Smiley. Oh, right. Jane Smiley. Okay. To make a note that somebody figured it out. So as you're writing, you're just flying by the seat of your pants. That must also be thrilling because there's going to be tons of surprises along the way. Good surprises, not all bad ones where you need to write yourself, out of a situation that you set up in a book that's already gone to print. But there's so many, the characters in this book are so rich and vital, and they just sparkle off the page. I just wanted to be friends with them. Did any of them surprise you along the way? Did they do things or show up in ways that you didn't anticipate?
Yeah, I think Germ, who is Rosie's best friend, she definitely surprised me a lot. She's so, usually my characters have like big pieces of my own psyche in them, and Germ is just so the person that I want to be. And she's kind of based on this boy who was in my grade school, Scott, who he like Germ in the book, actually, like the first day of kindergarten, like he just laid at the crack of the door and like screamed. But I know that sounds very pitiful, but he was a very irrepressible person, and he was extremely, like, he just had this huge personality, and he would hold these funerals for his lunches every day. And like we would all gather around the trash can, and then he'd be like, "It was a good lunch." He'd be like, "It was peanut butter and jelly." And like he'd say all these nice things about the lunch.
I love this kid.
He was amazing. And he was just always like, he just had this sense of like supreme confidence. And
Wow.
I wanted Germ to kind of have that. She is known at her school. Her name is Germ because a kid teased her and called her Germ. And she was like, "Well, fine, I'm going to be Germ then. And like, I'm going to own it. And like I want everybody to call me Germ." And yeah, so she's so unlike me that I think like she just kept, surprising me. And she's definitely like a bright thread that kind of makes Rosie laugh, and hopefully makes readers laugh. And
I loved her. I loved her. And I was not like her when I was her age. I was pretty shy. And so it was, when I read the part in the book that you just described, where she takes this, really kids, were really being very mean to her and giving her this nickname, and her just instinct to just, own it and turn the tables on them. I was like, man, if I could have just done that in like the 5th grade, I feel like the entire course of my life would have maybe changed. Like, it's just incredible just to have that be that self-possessed at that age, which is amazing.
Yep, I agree. I feel the same way.
Loved her.
And she
Did any aspect of the plot surprise you? Did any of that sneak up on you? Because in between, revised outlines.
Yeah, I'd say that actually that was the breakthrough for me, was that after the millionth draft and the book being maybe a couple of years past deadline, I the thing that surprised me was I was actually just Googling like, how do you write a book, basically.
I've done that. Totally done that.
It's like so desperate. And it's like,
how do you write a book?
Write a book.
Totally done that. Oh, so comforted.
And sometimes it totally helps. And so this one somewhere, I wish I could like give the credit where it's due, but like somebody was like, you gotta if you're doing fantasy and they're going to fight something, they need a weapon, and they need the weapon to like reflect who they are. And I was like, and up until then, it had been like, I knew she fought the witches with stories, but it's like, how does that actually
Right.
look?
Hmm.
Um, what is the concrete thing that
Yeah.
is?
Yeah.
I was so wrapped up in the idea of it, and I had no
Yeah.
idea how to make it work. And
Yeah.
yeah, so once, I won't say what her weapon is, but once she figures out what her weapon is, which is very much a reflection of who she is,
Yeah.
um, that like got the wheels going again. And finally I
Got
could
it.
just see my way to the end. And so that, yeah, that was a really nice
Awesome.
surprise.
Yeah, I'm glad that Google technique worked out for you. I'm hoping maybe at some point it will for me too, because every time I start a new book, I'm like, I should look up how to write a book again because I've forgotten since the last time.
There's some good, yeah, I found some good stuff on,
Okay, so you can start sending me some links. I can just follow along. Um, I have one or two more questions for you, but I'm going to save them because we've got some questions in the chat, and I want to give folks a chance to ask you some things as well. Our first question is from Jenny Lou. Hi, Jenny. Um, she would like to know what it's been like jumping from young adult novels to middle grade novels.
um I mean, yeah, it's hard to, I don't even know. I think I like we were talking about earlier, like it's the same things in, no matter what, like it's the
Mhm.
same, my protagonists are younger, obviously. I think like for me with my middle grade books, I do a lot more humor. I try to be a lot more quirky and silly and
Mhm.
funny. I think like that is a big part of, really goofy. I think that's a
Mhm.
big part of all of my
Yeah.
my middle grade books. Whereas like the themes kind of are not that different in the different kind of um, genres or age groups that I write for,
Yeah.
but definitely the way like I approach them, and like
Yeah.
there's a lot more sometimes tongue in cheek stuff in my
Mhm.
middle grade, and um, yeah, and there's a little more kissing in my young adult books.
It's a little better tolerated in young adult novels than in middle grade. Let's see, we have another question from Tina, who wants to know what inspires you to write. That's a great question. What inspires you?
Yeah. Thank you, Tina. I think usually it's just, writing has always been the way I process things in life since I was very small. I've always written in my diary, every
Mhm.
obsessively, and because it was like my like like the other piece of my brain that like I
Right.
needed, that was like external, that I
Right.
needed to have to like process what's going on. And so I think
Yeah.
whatever, there's always something going on right now that is like causing
Yeah.
me to write what I'm writing right now. And
Mm.
I don't think it's ever very obvious what that is because I don't write very topically.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it's always something I'm that's challenging me, that I have questions about. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't have the answers. It's not about having answers, but it's just about things that I'm have a lot of questions about, and
Yeah.
that's sort of the first. And then the other thing is I really love atmosphere, and so I think like a lot my books usually start in a sense of atmosphere, like they start with a feeling of like this
Yeah.
is the place where this
Yeah.
happens, and this is how this place feels, and
Yeah.
that's like a major creative like inspiration for me, is just
Yeah.
having that sense of like this is like
Mhm.
what I want this feel to be, and like
Mhm.
how do I make the story that feels like this.
Mm.
So yeah.
Love that. So it's sort of it's you're just sort of, writing from your subconscious. You just sort of move to write something. But I love that creating that atmosphere and that sense of place is so deliberate, because that you absolutely feel that across all of your books. And that you're deliberate about that, I think says a lot about the the way you approach writing, but also, why your books work the way that they do, work so well, because it's that absorbing, it's that sense of place. There's, suspension of disbelief, it happens in that instant when when this baby is being, kidnapped by these witches, and the dust is swirling and all you can hear is the crickets. And I mean, it was like time stopped. I could just feel that. I can't wait for y'all to read this book. Trust me, you're going to love it. Let's see. I'll stop going on and ask another question. Melissa would love to know, would you say you feel more room to take your time on your books, or more pressure to get them out now that you're an established and popular author?
Yeah.
It's a great question.
Yeah, no, when I first started writing and publishing, I had very strict time limits. Like I think for Maybird, which was really my first book, it might have been like 10 weeks or something very, very short. And now it's weird, but my wonderful agent, Rosemary Stamola, and I were talking about this, that it's, I can't, there's no way I could write a book in 10 weeks now. My brain doesn't do that anymore. And I usually take so much more time than I think that I should. And, luckily, my agent, my editors have been so incredibly supportive of that, and so supportive of the process. And I know, that I'm so lucky. It's such a luxury to have that time. So yeah, I do feel that pressure. I think I put a lot of it on myself. And of course, this book, I was so late with this book. And, I sit down and write every day. Like I'm very strict about my writing schedule, but it just was not coming. And that was a really, really hard.
Yeah.
When I'm behind on a book and I'm letting someone down by not turning it in on time, it weighs on me very, very heavily. And so in that sense, there's the pressure.
Yeah. I totally understand that. I couldn't write a book in 10 weeks. My heart started beating fast when you even said that out loud. It's like, I take. Here's another question from Benjamin. Let's see. In many fantasies, the use of magic is an expression of human desire for power, revenge, eternal youth, or protection. The ability to steal memories is such a terrifying power. Since memories are so integral to who we are as people. I agree. That was one of the things that was so creepy in the book that worked so beautifully. Taking memories is akin to taking a life. Did that type of magic present difficulties in the writing?
I think that, I like with all the witches, they all represent things that I find, particularly challenging about just the way the world works. And for the one about with memory, there's this, oh gosh, what's the song called? Killing the Blues by Alison Krauss. There's this line, it's like, there's nothing sadder than losing yourself. And that was really something that, I thought of all the things that are scary, like losing your attachment to who and what you remember, that's one of the big ones, and so yeah, I think it's really challenging for me to write all of those witches because I don't want them to be heavy-handed. I don't want to, have a witch that sort of is kind of greed, and in the second book, and I don't want to hit it on the head too hard, but at the same time, I'm just trying to write something I feel is true in a sort of magical way, and as Ben said. So
well, we have 1 minute left, and I want to get to one last question. This is from Madeline, who is 7 years old, And Madeline would like to know, what advice do you have for a second grader who likes to write stories?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think like you I think that like the big that like with writing, I think that my biggest piece of advice is always like just keep going, keep writing, keep you know, just I think like I think that the thing that I take I never know when like I publish a story or I by that time I can't like see it anymore. I don't
Mhm.
know what it is and whether it's good or not, I don't know. But I know that I tried really hard and like that's the
Yeah.
only thing that I can take pride in
Yeah.
it is I just tried really hard. And so for Madeline, I would say, just keep just stories are about writing stories about doing the best story that you can and that'll make it a good story.
That's great advice. Keep writing.
Keep writing.
Awesome. Oh, Jodi, this was so great.
Thank you, Amy. You're so gracious, and I just love doing this with you. I always have fun
I've had a
with you,
ball.
and I just can't say enough good things about In the Shadow of the Moon. I just
Well, I can't say enough good things about The Memory Thief, book 1 of 3. You all must read this book. We'll have Bookplates at Malaprops, and you can order these online at malaprops.com. And we'll be happy to send one to you wherever you are in the wide world. If you're not in Asheville, North Carolina, that's okay. And we'll put one of Jodi's book plates in it, and you can see what I see in this book, which is a wonderful, tenderhearted, fabulous, spine-tingling, and really, really warm story about friendship and family. Get it? Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Jodi. This was great.
Amy, thank you all for being here.
Thank you both. Thank you both so much. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Jodi. I just wanted to pop in and say thanks.
Oh, thank you. Just appreciate y'all so much. And it's just a really nice way to mark the end of a lot of work is to be with you all and talk books. It's been great. And I just appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Well, we're
Appreciate you
happy
too.
to do it, and we appreciate you. We appreciate both of you. We appreciate our audience this evening. Thank you so much for spending the hour with us and for supporting what we do. And we look forward to being with you all again soon. We hope you have a wonderful night.